It was 1920 when from the Maracaibo jungle of Venezuela, these four gaunt and desperate figures emerged, the last remnants of a 20-strong expedition of Europeans who set off up the Rio Catatumbo 3 years before. All the rest had died, victims of fever or of the poisoned arrows of the Motilone Indians. But one of them, geologist Dr. Francis Delois, still had with him one extraordinary picture, which was to divide the zoological world for 50 years. Could it really be an unknown ape? Yes, said Georges Montandon, France's most eminent zoologist. And he christened it Amer Anthropoides loisi, Lois's ape, though no ape had ever been known in America. But his deadly rival across the channel, Sir Arthur Keith, Fellow of the Royal Society, denounced the whole thing as a fraud or a nonsense. With academic scorn, he quoted Delois's own account in the Illustrated London News, telling of two creatures which had attacked Delois's party by the unorthodox means of defecating into their hands and throwing their droppings at the foe. The creature was merely a South American spider monkey, said Sir Arthur, with the tail either cut off or hidden. Dr. Montandon was not to be intimidated. He got his cousin, who worked for Standard Oil in Tulsa, Oklahoma, to send him a standard petrol tin packing case, as seen in the original photograph. Upon this, Montandon placed first a standard spider monkey, and then a standard Frenchman. Comparison seemed to make Lois's ape well over 4 feet tall. For Montandon, it was convincing proof. Since that day, no further evidence of a great ape has emerged from South America to vindicate Dr. Montandon or destroy theories of a hoax. But the question remains, why should a Swiss geologist, not much interested in zoology, his companions dying or being murdered all around him, be bothered to fake a picture? For that reason, if for no other, Lois's ape remains a mystery. But the mystery of the king cheetah, for 50 years the obsession of white hunters in southern Africa, does now seem near a solution. Paul and Lena Bottriel sold everything they had, even their house, in order to pursue the legend of a beast, ferocious and striped, more like a tiger, which ran with the cheetahs.
The normal cheetah we've known of for 5,000 years, and they've been absolutely identical. The Kubla Khan had 1,000 in his kennels, and many of these great princes and kings have had paintings and wall edgings done, and they've all shown the cheetah as we know, the normal spotted cheetah used for hunting, and there's been no difference for 5,000 years. And suddenly, in the last 50 years, we've come up with a cheetah which has these stripes and is completely different. There are some 26 skins. And as I say, everyone is absolutely standard. Stripes here, and the final part of the tail being ringed as with the tiger, which is a striped cat.
The Bottriels hired a balloon to search silently over the bush, until on the Mozambique border, they cornered their prey.
And it was finally in Kruger Park that we found a live king cheetah that had been there for a number of years, and no one had really known about it. Photographed it and filmed it.
This is the only known film of the striped king cheetah, running here with ordinary spotted cheetahs.
We could find a completely different species of animal, we don't know, and that in itself is enough to fight for and try and achieve.
What may be a baby version of the legendary New Guinea dragon has also been filmed. It is said to kill dogs and wallabies and to grow to 20, 30, even 40 feet. In 1979, a 6-foot specimen was shot near the River Fly, and naturalist Ian Redmond determined to look for a full-grown dragon.
We were staking out water holes because the lizard has to come for water every day, and some of the water holes are in a creek bed, so you're below the level of the forest floor. in a creek bed by a pool. And one day, there were two of us, a few hundred yards apart. I was sitting by one pool, and another chap by another pool. And I'd been sitting there for several hours, and nothing happened. It was about 10 o'clock in the morning. And I heard these footsteps. It's a forest floor, so there's lots of dry leaves on the floor. Just these quiet, softly scrunching of dry leaves. Now, if you hear a lizard moving through the forest, it's a scurrying sound. It doesn't sound like footsteps, and I thought it must be either the other chap coming over, whether it was playing about and trying to sneak up on me. I didn't know, but it sounded very stealthy. So I'm sitting down there, and I hear this coming up behind me, and obviously you decide at some point you've got to have a look. So as they were getting closer, I thought, well, person or animal, I'm going to see what it is. So I slowly sat up and looked around, and about 10 feet away, my eyes were about on the level of the bank. About 10 feet away, there was a log, and just over the log was this great lizard head. Now, I couldn't see the whole body, but I could see that the head and shoulders were a lot bigger than the one which had been shot. So I went down for my camera again, and as I went down to get my camera, the lizard moved away.
But the hunt for another of the world's tantalizing missing creatures has help from all the latest gear that Japanese technology can muster. These Japanese are in Fiordland, in the far southwest of New Zealand, looking for the largest bird that ever lived, the 12-foot-high moa. Excavations all over South Island have produced the massive bones of the moa. Flocks of their skeletons dominate New Zealand's museums. The moa certainly seems to have been seen as late as 1860, and one witness, Mrs. Alice Mackenzie, said she saw one on the sand at Martin's Bay in 1883.
And it took no notice of me when I came near it. And I got nearer and nearer until I sat down on the sand behind it. And it was a bluish color, just a faded bluish gray color.
From the structure of the neck and head bones, and with the help of a computer, the Japanese have ingeniously constructed what they believe may have been the call of the moa. Armed with the tape and stories that the call has indeed been heard in recent times, they set off into the forest, hoping for, yet perhaps fearing, a response from a bird that was supposedly able to split a man's skull with its beak or kill him with a kick. Sadly, there was no reply. The most puzzling of all the stories of missing animals comes from the snowy regions of Siberia, the disappearance of the great hairy mammoth. Professor Vereshchagin has been on the trail of the Siberian mammoth for 40 years.
И когда я бывал на Индигирке, в среднем течении, среди зарослей...
When I was camping beside the river Indigirka in Yakutia, it seemed to me that at any moment, from out of the dense undergrowth, the head of a mammoth with its hairy trunk might appear and wander into one of the clearings among the valleys. It is ideal mammoth country.
Долины реки Индигирки.
On expeditions to Yakutia in the far north of Siberia, Professor Vereshchagin and other Soviet scientists have found the tusks and bones of hundreds of thousands of mammoths, which seem to have died in some sudden catastrophe. But back in Leningrad, Professor Vereshchagin does have one of the remarkable specimens which just occasionally emerge from the frozen soil of the tundra. A whole mammoth, fresh frozen for 10,000 years. This is the Berezovka mammoth, just as it was found having fallen down a ravine and been asphyxiated.
И вот эта внезапная смерть, она подтверждается несколькими
Its pelvis was broken, And in its mouth, there was still a piece of food, a clump of grass which had not yet been chewed.
There have always been tales that mammoths still live in Siberia. And then, in 1977, some Soviet gold miners found a baby mammoth in almost perfect condition. Amid great excitement, it was brought back to the Leningrad Museum. But Professor Vereshchagin is sure it died at least 10,000 years ago.
The mother was killed by hunters. This baby was wounded by a spear in the right leg. It managed to get away, but died of starvation.
But the discovery of the baby mammoth has produced a possibility even more exotic than the thought that the mammoth could be still alive. Next time a mammoth is found, Russian scientists are going to take some of its frozen body cells and try to clone it. That is, grow, as is now theoretically possible, a new living mammoth from the cells of a body dead but preserved for 10,000 years. Meanwhile, in the winter gloom of Kennedy Airport, the two intrepid dinosaur hunters return from their quest in the Congo.
This expedition into the Congo was the most difficult thing that we've ever done, but it was well worth it.
It was both the best and the worst that I've been on. In the sense, it was the worst in terms of the difficulties encountered, but it's the most exciting in the results of any of the African things I've been on.
I remember walking through muck, slipping into slime up to my ankles, up to my waist at times. I remember the complete exhaustion every half an hour. When you couldn't get another breath of fresh air, you couldn't take another step. We were looking for eyewitness observers, and we gradually began to zero in on the geographical part of this area where eyewitness observers were concentrated. And using that technique, we were able to come to the center of the reports, to a place where actually the animals are alleged to be. They told us about how, about 1959, 3 of these animals, possibly 2, had been coming into Lac Telly. And this had disturbed the fishing of the pygmies. So the pygmies decided they're going to stop this and started to drive stakes in across the opening into the lake. This prevented the animals from coming in, but one was while it was attempting to get through the stakes, was speared by the pygmies. They proceeded to kill the animal and cut it up into slices. The report from the observer was that it took forever because of the long tail and the long neck. They described it as being about 30 feet long, with a head and neck 2 to 3 meters long, some 6 to 9 feet, looking much like a large snake, but attached to a thick body.
What was maddening about it was that at Adipena, we were, I would say, about 25 airline miles from Lac Telly, which is one of the places where there might conceivably still be living specimens of this creature. We were unable to reach the lake because it would have taken from 2 to 3 days to get into the lake, a comparable amount of time to march out, and we would have wanted to stay, sometime at the lake. And we would not have had time to get out of the country before our visas expired.
As we went along and gathered this information, I became more and more convinced that we are dealing with a real animal, perhaps extinct in a very recent past, but still a real animal. Yet if we believe what the Congolese and the pygmies told us, the animals are still alive today in certain parts of the Bai River, which is a tributary of the Likwala, perhaps even in the Likwala and perhaps Lake Telly. We conclude that there is indeed a real animal and that this animal is a species which is unknown to science in a living form.
So this case remains not proven. But if our exhausted heroes had been able to get their visas extended, they might have found what they were looking for. I think we've given enough evidence to suggest that very large, strange, and possibly amazing creatures may still exist in the remote places of this world. But while they're protected by jungles and swamps and various African bureaucracies, they may be safe from detection for a long time to come.